Loud or to this?
Hello, everybody.
Don't worry about it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Hazelmere Climate Talk 20. We're delighted to have you here today, and we're delighted to welcome expert composter Jeannette Buckle. And Jeannette is also author of a book called Saving Pounds and Planet, which I'm sure she's going to talk about, at least give us some of the inside track on that as well later on in this talk. And please do go ahead and ask questions throughout if you'd like something explaining straight away. And if you'd like something to be asked at the end, then please put it into the chat and we'll come to it at the end. So Jeannette, thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ed. So as you know, my name is Jeannette Buckle and I'm author of Save Pounds and the Planet. And as the picture implies, I'm also going to talk to you about worms and compost in general. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I've been working in the environmental sector for, it says over 28 years, but to be honest, it's since 1991. Master composter since 2007, an energy champion. So that's a Bucks initiative as well, helping people to reduce their energy consumption. Love food, hate waste trainer to train people to reduce their food waste. That's a RAP initiative by central government. And I'm very proud to say that the Eden Project still continue to buy and stock my book since 2015. Next slide. So I was asked to talk about composting earlier in the end of last year. And I said, February is probably the best time of year because things are starting to grow and you start thinking about your garden. So why compost? It adds fertility and structure to your soil. It's a good alternative to peat. But more importantly, actually, if you compost at home, you don't need to buy any other type of soil, be it peat or normal compost. You can grow your own, so to speak. A very good environmental thing to do is to keep anything biodegradable out of your waste bin, because that produces methane, which is 23 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. So anything out of that black bin like that biodegrades is good. Hence, composting is brilliant. Next slide. So the key to composting is that it is an aerobic process which decomposes the waste, biodegrades it. If it goes anaerobic, that is in the absence of air, that's when people might have a slimy little pile that goes nowhere, okay? And that's because there isn't air in your heap. But I will talk more about how you deal with that later on. Composting is about decomposition. It's going to happen in nature with or without your help. Home composting is a way of harnessing that, speeding it up, so that you, the gardener, can use it. So lots of microbes and organisms there that break it all down, and yes, worms. Okay, next slide. So you can compost in anything you actually want to do. With the Save Pounds and the Planet hat on, you don't have to buy anything. So some of you will recognize these different things. Bottom right is what we call a Dalek. That's handy if you've got a small garden. As long as you keep filling it up to the top, and you can take with a spade the compost at the bottom, it will be ready. The bigger the compost bin container that you have, the higher the heat, the quicker you'll have an end product. So depending on the size of your garden, usually the one to the far right, the wooded one, is what you would have in a bigger garden, or maybe two or more, depending on how large. Next slide. So like I was saying at the beginning, the most important thing for a compost heap is air, okay? As well as heat, the higher the heat, the quicker you get compost. Water, perhaps the better word is moisture. You don't need to add any water, but if it's dry, and you'll know that because there'll be ants in it, that isn't good. So I'll show you how to avoid that happening. And food is actually what we're putting in there, and I'll talk a bit about that. Now, position, if you're a compost heap, you'd say, I'd like to be in a sunny spot in the garden, please, because that will help you raise the temperature. But to be honest with you, that's where I think my deck chair should be in my book. and not really where I want my compost heap. So all I would say is you should put your compost heap where it suits you. Some people like it near the back door. Me, I like to feng shui it and have it bottom left-hand side of the garden, and you would have your garden shed on the bottom right-hand side. Just a bit of side information. Next slide. So to hot compost, you need a mixture, or any composting, you need a mixture of what I call browns and greens. Browns are woody material, cardboard, egg cartons, and greens are grass and fresh fruit and veg. Okay, a compost heap, I would say, is a vegetarian, but really it's a vegan. It doesn't want eggshells, even though some people used to put them in, or still do. And it doesn't want bread or any plate scrapings, even though that they are food. Okay. Now you don't want any plate scrapings or eggs because they attract vermin. And they're better in Buckinghamshire in the food bin. You don't need to put eggs in there, eggshells, because they don't actually break down, they just crumble. And if you want to use eggshells in your garden, you're best sticking them in a bucket and then using them to prevent slugs around your lettuces, that sort of thing. And the mineral in the eggshell will absorb into the soil around. So that's actually a better thing to do. And you reduce any risk of vermin. Next slide. Oh, but just before you go on, because we have very good recycling in Buckinghamshire, the latest data that I could get my hands on said about 57%. Really, from an environmental point of view, you're better putting your cardboard and paper, shredded paper, etc., in your recycling as opposed to in your compost. Okay, but if you can't get that split of 50-50 browns and greens, because you've got maybe just all lawn with just one bush, then you would need to supplement the ratio with something like cardboard egg cartons to get that 50-50 split. Okay, but if you've got enough woody material, you don't need to do that. Now, as the slides there, I'll go on to tell you how to hot compost. So a lot of people think composting's hard work, digging, that sort of thing, turning the compost heap. And yes, you can do that to add air back into the system. But the lazy way really is to hot compost. So what you're doing is you're making a club sandwich or Victoria sponge, where you're laying first the woody material, crisscross, twigs, whatever. And then you're putting, which is the browns, and then you're putting the greens, the grass and the vegetable peelings on top. And then you layer again with the wood. If you do this and stack really quickly, you will rise the heat in the temperature of the compost heap, and then it will break down quicker and kick start. Never think you've got to put a little bit in and see what happens before you add more. Just keep stacking as high and as quick as you can, because you build up the heat in so doing. So best tip is when first you've got some woody bits, leaving air in, not so finely shredded as that wood shows actually. Then you've put your grass, you know, your husband or your wife's mowed the lawn, put the grass down. After they've done that, that's the time to go around and pick up all the dry leaves and twigs and other garden debris that's brown and stick it on top. It acts like a lid, and the grass, the nitrogen-rich grass that you put on top and all the fruit peelings really makes the heat rise, and then that breaks down the woody material underneath. So that's the system. Grass, straight away put your woody material on top, and then you can put your flower cuttings and grass and non-perennial weeds on there. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide. So I was just talked about the hard way of turning. If you've got problems in it, you don't feel it's going down quick enough, instead of turning, what I do is an old a garden rake, use the other end, the handle end, and punch holes through your compost heap. It's funneling to from the sides or the tops. Basically, if it's not happening quickly enough, it's because there isn't enough air in. Okay, so you build air by doing that or turning it. Okay, and compost is going to happen with or without your help. It doesn't matter how bad you are at composting, you will get compost. It's just a question of when. So the tips with hot composting I'm telling you is going to help you speed it up, but you will get compost, and it'll be, next slide, it'll be nutrient rich, add soil structure, completely organic, and of course locally grown. No miles to get the compost to your garden. Okay, and what I do is I don't bother to sieve it. I think that's overrated. When I've got the compost, I shovel it into my wheelbarrow till it's reasonably full, and then I just basically get the spade and chop it up. Put the spade in and chop it up, which will look like a combination of the bottom left-hand picture, and then I use that. I don't mind a little bit of woody things because it adds structure to the compost that I put around my bedding plants, and it helps keep the weeds down. If you want to have really, really fine, sieved material, if you've got oak trees in your back garden, the best thing to do is do what people would call leaf mold. And that's just oak leaves. And if you're near, if you get a lot of oak leaves, you get a lot of oak leaves. And they're sometimes difficult to compost in the normal compost way. You have to put less often. So the easiest way to make beautiful leaf mold that everyone will want off of you is an old bin liner. You've put the leaves, the brown leaves from the winter, in there, and you take the air out. You squeeze it into a little briquette and stick it and stack it behind your compost heap. And then in a year or less, you will have the most amazing leaf mold that you could put around your petunias or whatever you want to do. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, slideshow's stuck. I can't seem to go to the next slide.
Quick question, Jeanette. What's top dressing?
So top dressing is what you'd put around your bedding plants to look pretty, Okay. So I tend to, I'm a lazy gardener, so if I like a compost heap because, come spring and there's some weeds or not or whatever, I just stick a spadefuls around the plants and it looks all lovely and brown. And then if you see a weed coming, it's really obvious. And then you can just pick it out. But keen gardeners would put compost around their prized plants to feed them. So, and that top dressing is that word. So I'm going to, can you go through the slides, Fiona?
Yep, sorry, I'm here. It's that was the next slide, but for some reason.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry. Now I'm going to talk. Any more questions on composting specifically before I talk about the Safe Pounds and the Planet?
Just one for me is, what about getting worms into your compost? Is there such a thing, or are they all going to arrive miraculously up from the bottom?
They are all going to arrive miraculously up from the bottom, and it won't be just worms. It will be anything that's crawling on God knows how many legs will be in there. If you've got, it's best not to put it on concrete because it'll make it harder for the compost to get started. But if you put it on bare soil, you will get compost. Now, some people put, you will get worms and all the creatures under the sun underneath there before you know it, okay? And the biggest activator actually to break down the compost is the microbes, spores, molds, those sort of things that do a lot of the work. So it's not just the creatures, okay?
I've got a question. So, can I ask about worms as well?
Yes.
I've got one of those Dalek things, and as well as more open compost, but in the Dalek particularly, sometimes the worms gather at the top where they can't get out, and they obviously want to get out. And what I'm never sure about is, because I always think these worms in the compost bin are not the same as the worms you found in the ground. Should I put them into the garden in the flower bed, or is it because I've got the wrong mixture in the bin or something?
No, it's probably because it's nice and warm and sunny there. It's hotter, you know, it's probably that. The worms that are in a aerobic composting bin are the fat worms you see in the garden. The other types of worms that you get in a wormery are brindle worms, things like that. And they're a different type of worm. But the normal common garden worms that you haven't put in your compost heap will be able to leave. Okay, obviously it's a little bit harder to leave. They've got to go down the bottom and have the nous to do so. Yeah, but they will travel up and down and do their thing, so you don't need to rehome them. Okay,
Okay, thank
any
you.
more questions on composting that spring to mind now before I go on? Okay, I'll crack on. So, horrendous household facts. So I wrote the book Save Pounds and the Planet to inspire people. So I thought if I scare them with some horrible facts, that might help. 70% of the earth is covered in water. Only 1% is easily drinkable, ready to drink. Food waste costs £60 a month. Now, that figure is perhaps way too low because food prices are rising. And this is from 2015 figures. So it's even worse than that. Again, energy, 20% could be reduced in the home. And you must get a water butt or 2 or 3 and save on using tap water to water the garden. It's also better for your plants, by the way. And in fact, also a tip is it's better to clean your car with water butt water. Okay, and especially if you rinse off. I'm seeing a question. Are there any home fruit and veg? What was it? Are there any home fruit and veg? No, anything that's been cooked really shouldn't go on the compost heap. Okay. The fact that it's 100% vegetarian or vegan, it's got fat in it, it's got stuff like that. So all those sort of icky things should go in your brown food bin. Okay. Next slide.
Sorry, I don't know what's the matter with this. It won't move on slides. I'm so sorry, everybody. Bear with me. I will have to unshare again.
Can I ask a question while Fiona's doing that in the background? You mentioned ants. So my composting bin is full of them. Am I doing something wrong?
Your compost heap is too dry. Okay, so you have choices. Depending on how large it is, you can rebuild it. You might have a lid on it, and that's why. So take the lid off so it can rain in. Okay. And you need to, if it's really dry, you need to reactivate it. So you either have to start a new pile, making sure you layer like the club sandwich with the greens in between and use what you've got. Mm-hmm. It's not an old wives' tale because it's true. You could activate it by putting a little bit of urine on it. Not ideal, but that would work. But yes, rebuild or put a watering can. Add a bit of water to it. If you haven't got the greens in there, you see, you just got too much dry. That's what the trouble is.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
That's all right. So back to the PowerPoint. So the reason I wrote the book to empower people, to bust the myth that that everybody can do something and make a difference, and that actually doing the right thing isn't harder and going to cost you more. So hence this book is about showing people it's easy, you actually save money and you don't have to make sacrifices. Unfortunately, all the headlines talk about things that most people would not want to give up, like a holiday in the sun or the car, as an example. Obviously, we've moved to electric cars now, and it's much easier to do the right thing and still drive from A to B. But the focus of the book was making it for everyday easy to get as many people as possible to do a little and gradually more, as opposed to a minority of people doing a lot. So the critical mass would be better for more people to do the everyday easy, as I would call it. So that was the focus of my book, because I used to work for a big waste management company, and I would do talk and tours around recycling centres, and I realised that there was just a gap of knowledge, and also a guilt that if you didn't do everything, that somehow that was a bad thing. So hence the reason for the book. Next slide.
Ah, so sorry, this is just not working from my end. So bear with me. Sorry, I'm going to have. What I'll do is I'll put it up on.
We'll put all the slides maybe together.
Yeah,
and then,
I was going to say I'll just unshare and then I'll share the main screen again.
Any questions while we wait?
There we go.
Another question. Sorry,
If you
question.
don't have grass, and you have a lot of woody material in your garden, it's fresh fruit and veg and flower cuttings, that sort of thing. So you would have to keep your woody material to one side so that you could get that 50-50 ratio.
Jeanette, what about excrement from the dog or a fox?
No, don't stick it in there. Hurl that at the back of the hawthorn hedge, if you have such a thing. Don't stick it in a plastic bag, because that ain't helpful. That's what I used to do, hurl it in the back of the hedge around the edges, and it will disappear. Or if somebody has a green cone, if you have a lot of dogs and a bigger problem, a green cone might be an alternative. And if any, it's in the details are in the book, but if anyone is interested, I can help with that. So the book saves energy, water, waste, time, and rubbish. Next slide.
Okay, you should be able to see the next slide.
Oh,
can you see it?
Yes, I can see it, but can
Okay.
anyone else read it? Can you do the four characters on the bottom right of your screen?
Yeah, no, every time I try to share it on a
No,
slide,
don't share it. Do the
it won't. Right, try that.
the other way. The other way. No, back again. No, you're going the wrong way. So, oh, wait a minute.
We were up to.
Yeah, so one more. Right, so the book has over 365 everyday easy tips. I say 365 because that's the year and I gave up counting. Okay, so there's many more in there than that. So they're from the obvious, like controlling your heating and lighting, doing some basic DIY, to simple good habits like buying green products when you can, practicing reuse, and doing with items that you only use once, and using the right pot on your cooking hob, and cutting down your heating and lighting, and many, many more. So there's the not so obvious but everyday easy that are quite big, significant wins, and that is a drop of olive oil as a furniture polish. And I say that because it's about cutting out the chemicals in your home, and I can literally do an hour's rant on that alone. And there's vinegar as a descaler and bathroom cleaner, and literally malt vinegar is the one that I use. Now, in the book, all these things have been tested over years and, where possible, referenced and backed up with data. So, and researched, and the things that came my way that I hadn't used before, hadn't done, that didn't make the grade, I did not include in the book. Okay, so and then the one thing that is prevention is better than cure, and that is a wiper blade in the shower. If you notice when you go on holiday, they're in and out of that bathroom so quick, you think, how have they made that clean? They've done nothing else but dry it, because it's the water that dries on your shower or your bath or your tiles that is the thing that you have to clean and is a pain. So if it doesn't dry, then you've got no scale, then you've got nothing to clean. So literally revolutionized my life when I got a wiper blade and just dried the shower thing, you know, saves hours. Next slide.
No, for some reason, it doesn't like it when I put it on full screen. Okay, bear with me. Sorry, everybody.
Any questions?
There we go.
So if there's a slide, there's a picture that says 4 little characters. Oh, okay. So with this slide, great. So when I was talking about backing up facts, the energy and water companies had evidence, quite a lot of money attributable to saving things. And so I've shared them. There are many more other savings that there wasn't any evidence to back up how much money is saved. So this is a minimum. So from changing from a bath to a shower, £40, boiling a kettle just for what you need, £8, and you can see the list, and I go on. Now again, these are 2015 figures, so this number is well above £2,000 that you can save. Some of these things you might already do, and then you can pat yourself on the back thinking, well, I do that already, great, that's brilliant. But there is so much more, and these are just the ones that I could find a reputable, verifiable evidence base. Now the book contains all the links, all the evidence to back that up, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, because there's so many things you can do that no one could ever put a price to in savings, but clearly save you money. Okay, and I'm now trying to think of something, but if you, from what I would say, the obvious is that during the day, when you're home, and not when you're not home, open the curtains fully so as much sunlight can come in. I often see some people who are trying to save energy and they have their curtains closed day and night. This is not helpful. This creates damp and makes you miserable, and actually doesn't help the sun's rays heat the house. Putting furniture across half the window is not helpful. Putting furniture at the back of the room furthest away on an outside wall, that would help add insulation and let as much light in as possible. All these sorts of tips don't have evidenced money saving to it, but they clearly do help, and if nothing else, make you feel happier and better well-being too. Next slide, if that's possible. Great. So the book's got some guiding principles, which is avoid buying stuff you only need once. Plastic plates and cups spring to mind. Walk when you can, don't always jump in a car, or once you've parked somewhere, just do a little bit more walking. Finish the last scrap. So that basically means freeze it. So if you've got leftovers and you're not sure when you're going to eat it again, freeze it. If you've bought too much of something, freeze it. If you're about to go on holiday and you've got eggs and bananas and other stuff, freeze them. How are you going to freeze eggs, you say to me? You break them, stick the egg yolk in one, stick the egg white in another tin, and then freeze it. Bananas, take off the skin, slice them and freeze them. Okay, so the answer to save waste is freeze it. Okay, finish the last scrap. Yeah, cut down on chemicals. I can rant forever on chemicals. I used to have eczema and asthma, and I cut out the chemicals in my home, and I have no symptoms for years on either of those two issues. And it is purely down to chemicals. And dare I say it, the worst offender is fabric softener and aerosol air fresheners. Okay. So that's why fresh air is best. Open a window, don't spray anything. Okay. Don't spin it, hang it, use an airer outside or inside. Saves, especially now, save you a lot on your energy bill. And repair things before throwing them away, be it clothes or household items. And next slide. So the book will save you money. It will reduce your impact on the planet. Know that your efforts are worthwhile and be more aware of your lifestyle choices. Help create a calm, unpolluted environment and be a happier, greener, more comfortable you. I would say the book doesn't go into a huge amount of detail about go vegetarian or go vegan, but clearly the less meat you eat, in particular, the less cow, as I like to call it, the better for the planet and potentially the better for your health. But I'm not a health expert, and I decided that going a little bit, telling people what to eat was perhaps a step too far. But there is a wonderful, it's referenced in the book, called the Eat Well Guide, that shows you what you should be putting on your plate and how those food groups are made up, which highlights that we all eat normally too much meat. Okay. So last slide, or next slide, which is the last slide. Yes, so you don't have to make a choice between being cost effective and eco-friendly, and you don't have to be hard on yourself. You know, if you have to have a bath instead of a shower, just embrace it, accept it, and carry on doing the other stuff. You know, I wouldn't want to put anyone off or dishearten them because they're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Just do what works for you, and it will make a significant difference. And it will change the supermarkets and the things that you buy, because they notice these things and they change their shelving and their stocking because of it. So I've noticed on this sheet of paper, it doesn't say I have an ebook. So I have an ebook for $1.99 if you prefer that instead of a paper one. And open to questions. I don't know if I've missed any along the way. There was someone who said something about.
Yes, thank you, Jeanette. I asked a question actually, and then somebody's already given an answer, but maybe you could add to it. I was asking what you use as detergent to clean your clothes, and I just suggested, did you use an eco egg? But actually, somebody's commented on that in the chat anyway, saying they're not as environmentally friendly as they might sound, and they use, I can't put it in front of me now, soap nuts. Anyway,
yes.
Any tips?
So, yes, totally. So, and in fact, it's a handy thing that someone's asked me. I use soap nuts, okay? And basically an egg and these other things that you stick in and that do the washing, besides all the plastic in the packaging and the whatever, I think the active ingredient in there is chopped up bits of soap nut. Okay, so the simplest, cheapest, and far more fun way is to have maybe 5 or 6 soap nuts, nice and cheap and easy to buy in bulk. Put them in an old sock, and you stick it at the back of your wash. Okay, so I wash all my darks in that, and all my colors as well. So the only thing that I might occasionally not wash in that, white, something like that, I use EcoVare. Okay, everything else itches, so I don't go anywhere near it. Okay,
right.
And of course, with soap nuts, you don't need fabric softener, and you shouldn't use it. And with EcoVare, you don't need it either. Okay.
And I know you're talking about, big things maybe less palatable to people, so do lots of small things. That's partly obviously a communication thing. How do we, assuming that people here who are listening are mainly people who are interested and committed to doing these things, how do they start the conversation with the next door neighbour in order to get them doing it?
I think the biggest block to make people embrace it is fear of failure, fear of judgment, and making it complicated. Oh, it's too much bother. I'm a busy working mum or dad, or I can't do this, I can't do that. So a lot of the tips in the book are zoned into rooms. You know, I use one example because I'm sitting right next to it, is that I have a home office, and I have the paper box underneath my office desk, you know, because it's exactly where it needs to be. And when my daughter was still at home, because it's not just you in the home, it's all the family you've got to convert. And when you've got annoying teenagers, when they're in that age, you know, what do? And what I did was I put the recycling bins in the kitchen, nice and easy, and I hid and put furthest away the black bin bag, you know. So it was easier for people to put things in the recycling bin than it was to put something in the black bin. So you can do lots of little sneaky things that help everyone go on board. Like, you know, it's difficult to impose your will on your family that's living with you. You just need to let them see the light and be a bit patient. And I use one example, which is the fabric softener, you know, not mentioning the name, it started with L. So I stopped using it decades ago. And my husband, he thought, well, I need that because that's what we do. You know, that's what one does. One uses fabric softener. So I just refused to buy it. And he did his own thing. He did his own washing. And it took him maybe a year or two to realize, actually, I don't need this, you know, because, you know, wifey's hanging up the washing and it's perfectly fine. Why am I wasting my time? And then eventually they get the message. Yeah. So
we did exactly that, Jeanette. We had in my kitchen now, I've got my recycle bins, and if the kids put anything in the bins, I end up going through the bins. And why did you put that in there? You know, but then I've also got my soft recycling that the co-op does. So if anything does come with soft recycling, there's a bag for that. There's a little box on the side for batteries. There's a little box on the side for little bits of tin foil, sort of milk bottle tops, those sorts of things. And now I get Instagram posts from my children going, have you seen this? This is really good, Mum.
Yeah, and what I also have, you know, in my utility room, I have an old box, when I say an old box, cardboard box that somehow got its way in the house, and it's the recycling box, or it used to be maybe a bag. When I say not recycling, sorry, I mean reuse. So it's the box that's going to go to the charity, because there's lots of stuff that sometimes people have lying around the house that will be better used in the charity, but you'll be surprised, you know, some things, you know, clothes that you've grown out of, it wouldn't occur to me to stick it in the recycling bin, or sorry, the black bag bin, but people do. So having that recycling box, especially when you got that reuse charity box somewhere where the kids can see, then that actually might help declutter toys that they've outgrown, that sort of thing.
Any thoughts on takeaways, Jeanette? One of the biggest sources of waste, of course, apart from not eating them, but
yeah, I mean, I'm old school, you know, I tend to cook my own food, and my idea of processed food is tin of tomatoes or a tin of baked beans. Okay, everything else I home cook and then just freeze. I think, again, you shouldn't beat yourself up. And if you have a takeaway, I tend to have just Chinese, because those little Tupperware things are perfect size for leftover meals for one. So I have a shelf in my freezer that's meals for one. So when people are eating at different times, it might be really useful. You just grab that and microwave that, job done.
I might just add to that on the local level, actually. All 4 of the local Indian takeaways, so the 3 in Hazelmere and the 1 in Holmer Green, I've taken my boxes back to them. So those type of boxes, and I put a little Ed marked on the top and the bottom, and I hand it to them, and all of them have given me my entire curry back without any new boxes. So,
That's
that's
good.
brilliant.
That's a good one.
So
And
I'm
another
telling
one
everybody,
is
because Hazelmere and Holmer Green, all of them know, and they've all done it.
good. So that's a good tip. The one thing that I do, which perhaps people do less, is coat hangers back to the dry cleaners, because that's can't do anything else with them. So that's something else.
When I just Bentleys, I mean, because it's local tips, which are coming from Hazelmere. In Bentleys, when I go and get my suits, they don't put the plastic bag on it already. So it's hanging up there with no plastic bag because they know I don't want it. When they hand it to me, we undress my clothes. So we take the hanger off and the little things they've attached to it and everything else. It's all handed all the way back to them, including the safety pins. And then they continue. And they have said that now I'm not the only one. There's now 3 of us in Hazelmere who ask for our clothes with no plastic bags. So if other people can join the trend, and I'm sure it's the same in surrounding villages as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all helps, and they have to pay for it, don't they? So if whatever you take home, you're paying for all of it. So if you can avoid it, that's great.
Jeanette, may I ask a question on wormeries?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a wormery because I've got a tiny garden, so it's not big enough really to have a compost bin. And I love my wormery. I'm not worried about the worms. I'm quite happy. The little boy next door likes to come around and have a look at them and so on. But I find sometimes that goes a bit slimy. Is that an air issue as well?
Slimy? Shouldn't be going slimy. I suppose again, I tend to avoid putting cooked food.
Yeah, no cooked food goes in it.
No, so it shouldn't go slimy. It should be crumbly. Unless, is it, when you say, do you mean going moldy and a bit funny?
Yeah, I did. I then stopped putting stuff in it because I wondered whether I was overfeeding it. So
that's what I was thinking. If it's it'll percolate down to the different layers.
But I now have ants in it, so I don't know now whether you will. They're sort of flying ants, so you get ants coming in, and then they turn into those flying ants. You open the lid of the bin, and you get them all up your nose.
Yeah. So it might be that you're talking about something that happened in the summer. That wouldn't have been now. So it could be because you put too much food in there.
Okay.
If it's slimy, it shouldn't be slimy. If you pick up the end compost, is there any worms in there? Where are the worms?
The worms tend to be more at the bottom than they do at the top. They're supposed to work their way up through the holes and come into each layer as you fill it up. But they like it because it's nice and warm at the bottom, so they tend to stay down the bottom.
But I only put the food in one layer at the top.
Right.
I don't put it in the other layers because they want to sometimes get away, especially if you overfeed it. So I only put the food at the top, and then the rest is various grades of lovely worm compost.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's what I do. So I just fill up.
Sometimes if it goes a bit furry, because the mold's growing, I just take some of that out because I've put too much in, and the worms, there isn't enough worms. And before it goes dodgy, I take some of that, whatever's going furry, because that can be quite toxic for the worms if there's too much mold, and stick that in the food bin and let it calm down. So if I start seeing blue mold, furry mold, take it out. Okay,
thank you.
Deb Dunning did just ask near the beginning, actually, the first question, which we sort of missed, although you sort of covered it, but to cover it maybe in more detail. And Deb was saying, I've got 2 acres of grass to cut and I end up with a load of slime as there's just not enough brown material. What advice could you give me?
You're probably not the only person who hasn't got that 50-50 ratio. So if it's just grass, there must be hedgings or other stuff by the side. You need more air, so you'd have to have a lower heap or smaller heaps. But 2 acres is a lot to do that with. So your only thing is shredded toilet roll, cardboard, and all that sort of stuff. And if you you'll have to probably experiment to see if you get the right end product. But you could get some cardboard to even up that 50-50 ratio. So same principle applies. You put the woody stuff below, and then you put the green waste above, same quantities. And if you haven't got enough quantity, then don't carry on until you have got another layer of woody stuff, which could be cardboard, toilet roll, shredded paper, anything that's got air in it. And in that particular case, I would stomp through with the broom handle or the rake handle and force air into it, into your thing, because that's what's missing, is not the air. Turning it, that's heavy work. That's another way to get it going and breaking down quicker. Keep turning it.
Question where I think I already know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. So what about putting moss or ivy or blackberry brambles into your compost?
So brambles, so I suppose the answer is it depends where you're going to use your compost on. I tend to shove it all in. The only thing I don't shove in to my compost heap are dandelions and perennial weeds that I think are going to be a pain if they regrow. Okay, nettles are one of these things, you know, they're coming from next door's garden, you know, it's one of these things that you have to pull out, and I don't think it helps. But what you can do is you can drown nettles and you can drown weeds and then put them on there if you have a problem. So the easy way of doing that, a bucket of water or an old tub, and once they're drowned and dead and look pretty black and disgusting, then you could use them and you could tip them onto your compost heap.
And you think moss is okay as well?
Well, I don't think it matters, you know. I think it's I embrace moss because I think moss grows quicker than grass and there's less mowing to do, and it's green and soft underfoot, so what's not to love, you know, is my approach. And I have quite I'm back onto a row of oak trees, quite woody setting, even though the garden is quite open. So I do have moss in patches, and I just think, do you know what, it looks lovely and green and I don't have to mow so much. So that's me.
Right. Does anybody else have any questions? We're coming near the end now, so if you have a question, please pipe up and say it now. Janet Dixon, you've unmuted. Are you going ahead?
Sorry, I didn't want to speak. I've only just managed to join.
Right, no problem. That's fine. We're almost at the end. We were just asking if there's any questions. I suppose, Janet, if you've just joined, did you join because you had a burning question on composting? In which case, it's your chance to ask it now.
No, I joined for general interest, and I must say, I'm sorry. I thought the session was starting at 7.
Okay, no problem. That's fine. Okay, right. Well, we'll probably then just finish with one sort of bugbear I have that's connected with the Saving Pounds and Planet theme. Actually, we hear so much in the press about how expensive electric vehicles are and how it's all ridiculous and we can't afford them. Particularly with Amanda on here, who I can thank publicly for helping me buy my electric vehicle. So I got pretty much the cheapest electric vehicle you can get. They're now slightly cheaper. You probably get one for £5,000, but I bought one for £6,000 last year, a Nissan Leaf. And although the energy prices are changing a little bit now, I calculated that within 3.5 years, I get the entire value of the car back if I'm charging it at home rather than going and getting petrol or diesel to put in my previous car. So I get very annoyed in the press where I see things saying we can't afford to do it. I do understand you've got to be able to get either the loan or pay for the car up front. But apart from that, it's almost like people can't afford not to do it because it's saving hand over fist vast amounts of money, as well as being just more convenient once you get used to it. And for my tiny little battery, I just plug it into the 3-pin plug. So
yeah, totally.
I do the same with mine.
Yeah, totally in support of electric vehicles in any shape or size, even hybrids, because at the end of the day, most people's journeys are short. So, and of course, it's much cheaper to charge up from home. But even then, if you charge up somewhere else, it's still, I think you still end up cheaper than having to pay at the pump. And there's this initial phobia about I'm going to run out of energy, but you can run out of petrol too. You know, it's the same thing. So, but I think there's so many financial drivers for company car owners to go electric. I think before the deadline, I think petrol is going to be something for the classic cars. And even then, I hear from my brother who used to work in the automotive industry, even now you can retrofit your classic car to be electric. So people can still keep their cars and that. So it's definitely the way to go. Yes, you've got the issue of capital outlay to start with. But if you're changing your car, you'd be mad to buy a petrol. So God knows what they're going to do with them all.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you. I mean, and in fact, for those of you who are in or around,
I would only say there's only one thing, and I would fall into that category, is that, you know, my husband's got the electric car, and I have a VW up that was congestion charge free, so it's as good as it could get before electric came in a viable way. And I think the last couple of years I've done 900 miles. You know, on a bad year, I might do 3,000. So there comes a cost break point of, if you're not actually driving the car at all, which is even better, that it will take you longer to get your buyback. But most people, and I must be the extreme, probably don't drive their car above 10,000 miles a year and more.
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that as we conclude, I think now on that, but one of the things that we would like to be doing in the Hazelmere area, so anybody here who's from Hazelmere, Holmer Green, Penn, who would like to get involved, is we'd like to start a car club. So you know, and that means particularly if you happen to be driving less high levels of miles, it's great if we can cooperate and get a car club going in the local area. So if anybody's interested, please get in touch with Fiona and I, or Amanda, or whoever else. Anyway, so thank you very much, Jeanette, for that. That was absolutely brilliant. Wonderful.
Thank you, Jeanette.
So,
that was great. And just sorry, interrupting you, Ed, mainly for Janet, because she only managed to join at the end. I will be putting the whole of this onto our YouTube channel. So if you keep an eye on the Hazelmere Climate Action page, I'll put a link to it on there.
and also just seeing a few new faces on here who haven't come to previous talks. And you know who you are. We would love to see you on not only other talks, but also come and join us in the Hazelmere Climate Emergency Working Party, working on B², or working on our, try and get ourselves to net zero, or working on tree planting. Come and give us some support. We're, as always, we've got a group of about 20, where there's about 5 or 6 of us who turn up every time for the meetings. And we really need to get more people coming to those meetings and helping us with things. So please, if you're interested, get in touch with Fiona or Amanda or I, or Jeanette, and she will put you in the right direction to one of us as well. So lovely to see everybody. Thank you again, Jeanette. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.